Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Megan, joined by my co-host, Jen. Hey, Jen, how's it going?
Good. Happy to be here today, as always.
Yeah, are you going to come on here and say you're not happy to be here? You're uninvited.
I will
Officially off.
always tell the truth. I promise. I'll always tell the truth.
Well, I'm excited for today's episode because today we're joined by Jacob Hilbig, and Jacob and I connected a few weeks ago. And I love chatting with him because he'll share this, but he started at a very large established insurance company, and that's how he kind of cut his teeth in claims, and then took a little bit of a leap of faith and moved over to a startup, which is exciting, but it's whole new territory and a little bit risky. And so he's going to talk a little bit about that change and just the exciting things he's doing over at the startup. So, I think it's a really interesting conversation. I'm happy to have everyone tune into that. So with that, let's bring him in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Megan Henry.
Good morning, Jacob. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm so happy to have you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to having a good conversation.
Yes, as are we. And this is like your first time being interviewed on a podcast, I believe, right?
Yeah, I've been through many of interviews in corporate in general and speaking with clients, but as far as like a general podcast, this would be it.
Well, I promise you this is less pressure, less at stake, and more casual and more fun. I at least I hope so.
Good. Looking forward to it.
So, Jacob, what I go into a lot of times on this program, which most of our listeners know, is, we're here to talk about claims and all things like claims adjacent. But everyone's path into this wonderful world of insurance is different. And I personally find a great interest in learning everyone's stories. To much of anyone else's chagrin, if you don't enjoy listening to that, I do. So sorry, everyone has to listen to it. But what has been your path into claims? Because you, like many, I think, have had a slightly different path. It was not a direct shot. So I'm curious to hear about it.
Yeah, I think unless you're like on the attorney side of it, most people, and even maybe not that, like I've been in large carriers. I don't think anyone like gets into claims being like, this is what I want to seek a career in or do. It kind of just falls into your lap or maybe as a stopgap for something. So that was me. So I went to the University of Texas here in Austin and graduated, and just seeking different, job perspectives out there. I was actually in process to be part of like our local police department for Austin Police Department, which is at that time was a 2-year waiting period to go through everything between background checks and testing and PT and everything of that nature. So in between that, I needed a job to kind of fill what I was doing, right? So as it may be, my mother had been with Progressive at that time for 20 plus years as an analyst. And so my whole life, right, I wasn't so she was pregnant with me at Progressive. She would have already been there like 30-ish years. So I'd only ever known her to work at one company, and it seemed to work out pretty well for her. And so I, unbeknownst to her, applied for just like a customer service agent job at the same like corporate office that she was at, and got an interview and came on. So I started in like sales and service in a commercial area. So helping both agents, bind and underwrite and amend policies, and then also direct insurance, like when you have commercial insurance coming in, calling in as well. So we would update policies, take payments, do all those type of things. And then very quickly from there, I realized that wasn't the position for me, mostly just because it's a turn and burn, right? Like you just take a call, complete the call, hang up, and then you get another call in. So like, no matter how efficient or good at your job, I felt like there was never really any benefit to being better or quicker at that positions. And I wanted something that I could like utilize my talents with. So across the hall from us was started a new branch called a central claims unit. And the central claims unit was again, at the headquarters, one of the headquarters here in Austin, where they handled all kinds of claims, fairly low complexity, and had open positions. So I applied and moved into that. And that's really where my claims journey took off, right? So I did low complexity claims. Then I went to the local branch here in Austin and handled normal personal auto, then commercial auto, then I did bodily injury, attorney rep, litigation files, and did that for a few years, and then wanted to get into leadership. And then in 2017, Progressive took on the first contract with a TNC rideshare company of Uber for the state of Texas. So as that was building up, it seemed, kind of as a risky play, because with any like bigger company that you may join, like a rideshare part of it, it could come and go, right? We could have had a 6-month test and then dropped it. And then like now you're looking for positions again. And in Progressive's history, everything was super stable. Like commercial and personal auto policies were always there. We had never taken on a client like Uber. But I decided to take the jump and take the risk. So I moved over to that group and got into leadership and helped some of the first teams kind of take off the ground. And that's where my leadership journey started. So January of 2018, I started in there, and then I've been in some type of leadership capacity through commercial and personal auto ever since.
So wait, what happened to the police department?
Right.
Yes, there was a small break. And between I actually did take a small sabbatical for maybe 2 weeks. Like I was going through the full process. So I did get accepted and I started training. And then I think day 3 into it, I decided it wasn't for me. So I was reinstated back with Progressive. So part of my Progressive career never stopped, but I did at least get through the process, which for better or for worse, at least I know I could do it. I decided not to do it and then went back into insurance.
So 3 days into your police journey, you decided that claims was your life.
Yeah, it was potentially just a quandrum of things. So I joined, I was supposed to start the next April. And I remember this very vividly. Like in July, they were like, hey, we have a class starting next month. So August in Austin, Texas, if you've ever been here, is fairly rough. Yeah. So you're out there, on day 1 in full gear doing PT to just beat you down. And I didn't have enough preemptive prep time to get to where I wanted to be. So very quickly I was like, this is not what I wanted to do. So got out of it.
Well, it's really interesting, right? Because when you ask little kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a police officer. Nobody says I want to be a claims professional. But when it comes down to the reality of it, claims is a really cool job that
yeah, it could be. It's interesting. I would say but even growing up to that point, I never when I grown up said I wanted to be a police officer. That wasn't even really in the cards. Somewhere later, after college or during college is kind of where I took that avenue. But then obviously it wasn't super ingrained in me because I backed out of it. But yeah, claims can be super interesting, especially the BI side of it can be super fun. And then working with a client like Uber or other clients, you get some really off the wall stuff that goes on. I'm sure you hear about it in news articles and when you get those claims and you get the details in the police report, get pretty interesting.
Well, and that's also interesting that as a police officer, you do some investigation and you try to figure out what happened. And that is really similar to what you do as a claims professional. You're just doing it behind a desk.
Hey, not in the heat.
Especially even so much so our SIU departments that we've had in the past, we've hired prior peace officers because of those skills, or there are prior detectives if they wanted to make that transition, because there's a ton of overlap in investigational skills, scratching the itch to keep digging type thing. So
absolutely.
And look, if there's one thing that's a common theme on the show is career pivots are okay, because so many people we've had career pivots. I feel like if we have a guest that hasn't had a career pivot, that's an anomaly compared to someone who has, because that's just all part of growing up too. I even listened to my 12-year-old and she's like, I want to be a mechanical engineer. I'm like, that's a great career, but you're 12. And, when I was 12, I wanted to be a writer and then a doctor. And then I changed my mind 16 times over. So career pivots are quite okay.
Yeah, even in college. So to that point, I have a fairly mathematical background. So I went into college as a civil engineer and graduated with a bachelor's in kinesiology. So there you go. Multiple pivots. Yeah, it happens.
Yes. So, I do want to talk a little bit about Uber though, because at the time, I believe in the timeline when you were working on that Uber account, that was when Uber was relatively a newish entity, right? Was it early on in their
They were
launch?
growing fastly. So yeah, this is back. We were actually part of I don't know if you remember the CEO or the owner at the time kind of went through some controversy. So
Mm-hmm.
like it's at a time where he was like, yeah, it was growing exponentially, and then he got called out, and then he dropped down and became like a board member, and then they moved some other people around. So that was fairly volatile. It was fairly big, not just even like US wide, like it already started globally. So even though we only handled US claims, if you look at the rideshare book as a whole, like you would think Uber and Lyft are fairly similar, or they have a similar amount of book, but globally, no, Uber just dominates the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were still relatively new, and again, that's part of the risk. Like Progressive also at the time had never wrote a rideshare policy, like didn't know how to rate it, like
Yeah.
so there was a lot of like unknowns. So we took a loss. I think it was almost 3 years in the state of Texas for Uber before Progressive had made a profit on those claims. But you
Yeah.
learned so much in being able to take that on, and then they expanded to more states, and then eventually it became profitable across the board. But at the beginning, yeah, it's a lot. It's a ton of risk to get involved in it.
And you're probably seeing too, like, different types of claims at that point that are a little unique to a ride share type program. I get, and that must have been a learning curve in and of itself, I imagine.
Right. Also, the controversy at the time was like, are Uber drivers? We couldn't even call them. You actually don't call them Uber drivers because they're not.
Yeah.
They're independent contractors. So you would
Yep.
just call them driver. So
Yeah.
yeah, like that. There was a lot of laws and stuff going on, specifically in California, where they were fighting for
Yes,
the
there was a
drivers were
strikes.
fighting, yeah,
Yeah.
to try to become beyond contracted employees, where they actually earned benefits and some other things, and had like a set wage and whatever. So a lot of that went along with it. But in general, like dealing with a higher profile client, and even I had commercial policy experience before, but they're relatively small commercials, so there wasn't necessarily a PR behind it. With Uber, there
Yeah.
was. So like sometimes your leniency or your willingness to settle is expanded greatly because you
Hmm.
do have the PR behind it. Even if we are in the right and we know we can fight this, the ultimate lowest
Hmm.
cost to the client may be to settle just because of everything that comes along with
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So, and you're at, and how long were you working on that account, and then where did you pivot to after?
Yeah, so I was 2018 became a leader in the account, and then through 2020 during COVID, I left for a brief stint just because Uber pretty much shut down. Like Uber Eats
Yeah.
did pick up, so we had some claims coming in, but
Mhm.
like the rideshare business in itself of like
Yeah.
person to person just wasn't existent. So we had minimal claims. So I went over to our commercial book and did that for a while. I also did some cat claims that were catastrophe claims that were coming through. And then I did that for about a year. And then as they started to pick back up in 21, moved back over to the book and then did it. And then in January 2024, I left Progressive. So after 12 years of being
Hmm.
with the only company I ever knew, I only knew one way, took a risk and moved to a startup insure tech at Reserv. So been there. It'll be coming up on 2 years this January. And then with that, now it's a TPA. So like a completely different from like being a carrier, making all decisions, to now a TPA where it's more client driven,
Hmm.
listening to their wants and needs. And then, we're paying the things, but we don't actually, we're paying out of someone else's paybook, right? And then we have it, we didn't write the policy. We're using a different, brokers and insurance policies that we're, working off of. So it's a completely different world, and going from like a very small piece to like, the 80-year conglomerate that is Progressive into like
Hmm.
one of, less than 100 people at the startup. So quite a big shift.
And so, first, how did the move over to Reserve come to you? Did it just come to you, or were you like, okay, like maybe maybe it's time for a change, or was it something that, like, you got approached by whether a recruiter or what it may be, that it was like, okay, let's take a leap and see what happens here?
Yeah, probably a mixture of both. I think because I'd been doing the same thing for so long
Hmm.
at Progressive, and I saw, again, being such a small piece of it, and saw like I didn't want to move up within that business, and to expand out within Progressive, like I really wanted to do more, either process stuff or a business advocate or something else. With that, those leaps are fairly hard to make within progressive because everything you do is so niche, right? Like you get really good at one thing, but to like jump over without having the background or going to school for it or even starting it, I'd have to like potentially, so like I was a level, et cetera, right? Like say I was a level 5 to go like jump to a business, I'd have to move to like a level 3. So you'd have to take multiple steps back to like learn a different experience, then get good in it, and then move back up into the level I was at. So in having that kind of thought process, I did see, by LinkedIn of all things, Reserv as an upcoming startup that needed, similar capacity to what I've already done. So like, because I had such experience with Uber, like there's a lot of overlaying similarities between that and like being a TPA and working with clients. So then a recruiter reached out, touched base with them. I actually had initially interviewed with a recruiter probably 6 or 7 months before I moved over because they were so small, they were hiring fairly slowly and then only as positions needed. So I interviewed, then didn't really think about it too much, just kept in contact with the recruiter. They reached back out like 3 months later, had another interview, and then another month later had like 3 different panel interviews, kind of went through the VP and executive there, and then moved over and started in January.
And so going from such an established machine like Progressive and then to the startup, I imagine there had to have been some shock value to that too, because it's just like you go from something that everything is like established. This is like everything's in place. We have our standard operating procedures, and now it's exciting. You probably get to decide and do a lot on your own, but also I imagine there's a little bit of there isn't a standard operating procedure. We have to come up with whatever that may be. How was that change over for you?
Yeah, extremely so, to echo that. So I've always thrived fairly well in somewhat chaotic, like ambiguous environments. Because I'm fairly I can manage myself pretty well and fairly time manageable type things. But yeah, to a very nth degree of what you said, right? In Progressive, we had, a page, I can't think of a SharePoint site that had everything you could ever think of. You could ask it a question and tell you exactly what procedure and what process to follow. Because you had people in the background, like a whole process department that was working on that for years and years, and they had perfected it down to a T. And then coming over here, we use Notion, but we had like a Notion page with some things on it. So like, yeah, we basically built the standard operating procedure. We're still ever tweaking it. And I think that's, why we hire people like me and others. We need best practices from what they've done in the past to potentially get better at what we're doing. We don't know what we don't know, right? And obviously it's going to be client specific to some extent, like what are they wanting, or what does the book need, or what is, the commercial element to it that we need to look at. But it was, super exciting. As my VP at the time would always say, it's like drinking from a fire hose. So you jump on, and there's no like best practice to get acclimated to it. You just have to go. You have to be involved. You have to shadow. You have to be in the meetings. So even though I'm remote, I have more FaceTime and meetings than I've ever had, and to the extent of everything, just because you've got to be involved. You've got to hear everything. We don't have like the coffee talk where we're like, you can overhear other people. So we're just involved as much as we can to kind of get the best overview and fixes and work and fix as much as we can. So.
Yeah, and I mean when you mention a lot of FaceTime, which is great, and a lot of meetings, which is great, but like that also can impede like getting the actual like work done. I say this from a personal point of view, because like I feel like some days, I could be on calls, almost all day, and then I look at my email and it's piled up and I can't even make a dent into it. And, like when is the time to actually get the other stuff done?
Yeah. So welcome to my life, all of my peer managers and then like leads. So yeah, we very cognizant of that. And then at some point, depending on what you're in, sometimes you have to multitask, which is not always the best practice, but stuff we'll do. And then if meetings and early, and yeah, there are hours to work outside of your meetings. So like I only ever have meetings, from 8 to 4. So outside of those hours, I can get some other stuff done.
So
But
outside of 8 to 4, you can get all your work done.
Sometimes, yeah. So, to an extent, yeah. So if you were to look at my calendar, per day, I would say I probably have 2.5 to 3 hours of blocks, open blocks. Everything else is scheduled. So during those times, and then some days I'll literally have like a 30-minute open block. So yeah, and that's a problem we're dealing with, and it's a real thing. And I think in any startup that you're in, like there will be times potentially for the first couple years that's just what it is. But I also think the amount I've learned in as many hats and I've been able to get involved in is way more beneficial than not having enough time. Like to the amount I've learned and been able to grow in the last 2 years compared to the prior 12 years is potentially more, or at least on par, right? So like you're just exponentially gaining so much more knowledge and experience than you would have by not being able to do this type of thing.
And how different is the company from when you started in January 2024 to now? Like how much have they grown in size, and do you see a lot of differences?
Yeah, I think culturally, and even like benefits and stuff it's different. So I was right at the 100th employee, but we do have UK employees and US. So I would guess somewhere around 70 or so in the US as far as permanent employees. And then now, I think I looked earlier, we're right at 600. So within a 2-year span, we've almost six-folded. Yeah, it's an extreme amount. So there's a lot of things like we were doing in the beginning, like, between Slack and open channels that like you knew everybody and you could talk to everyone, and like it was super open, and like, which is beneficial. Like I got a claim, instead of like you could like just message the whole corporation, and like the other claim member, you wouldn't even have to know. And now that's much more segmented, right? Like we've split up. We have different departments, and we have gained a lot more like process and engineering people that we just didn't have. I think we had one engineering person in the beginning. Everything else just fell on all the leaders. So that's been beneficial. The cry for help of like, we need more data, we need more expertise in these areas. So we've been building out that, along with obviously building out actual claims adjuster in the claims department that go along with it. And then we just started like new sales people that will come on and like obviously try to promote our book. For the first, even before I came, up until maybe 6 months ago, we didn't have anyone really doing that. So like just the word of mouth of what we were doing was our sales. And to a great extent that was fine. Like you only need to grow so fast. I think at some point, growing too fast, unless you have like an acquisition, it's really hard to keep up with staffing, a good staffing, to that extent. So kind of a mixture of that. And then culturally, like even at the beginning, we had a certain plan for benefits and PTO, and it was just like we're so small. And then we just changed over actually this October 1st, and then going into 2026, we changed over that. We changed our PTO plan just to more of like a larger corporation would, compared to like 100-man group. So I think culturally we've stayed relatively the same. We're fairly open, very transparent, ton of Slack time, again because we're so remote, lots of virtual meetings, video on everything, just because like you can't see intentional without seeing someone's face, right? At some time, like just typing or even hearing someone's voice can be perceived incorrectly or not what you meant or intended. So I think all that we're very open with, and we try to keep.
Yeah. We had this conversation very recently, we meaning Jen and I, because like we are also like, we're a smaller office, and we're a newly established office, and we're growing. And with that, it's, we're trying to figure things out as well, even though we have our firm has a larger footprint. Like we are growing our practice and how we're doing things. And with that, there's, growing pains as well. And it just recently, when you're talking about tone, Jen was saying, like, I know when I say this in an email, like, I hope I'm not coming across in like one way. I promise you I don't mean it that way. It's just like that sometimes the tone gets seen in one way when it's not meant that way. And, and I think she felt the need to clarify and be like, I promise I'm not being mean, which like,
yeah,
just being direct.
If we were in the office together and I was talking to the paralegal or our legal assistant and saying like, hey, can you do this for me? Like your tone is one thing, but when you're sending an email, I'm like, hey, can you do that? Like, it could come off as sounding
like a directive. Yeah.
Yes, where you're just asking, like, you're just trying to ask them to do things. And I promise, because she was new. I'm like, I promise. I'm like, I'm not a mean person, and I'm not like yelling at you. It's just like sometimes too in your head, right? Like you are going through step by step. Okay, this is what I need to get done today. But, and like you're just translating it onto paper, and it can come off in the wrong way.
Yeah, and there's only so many emojis you can.
Yeah, we're millennials. We like to use emojis.
Yeah, I try to. I'm fairly cognizant of that too, right? Because like I've got so many things, and I'm trying to be aware of my time. So like I'll be giving out directives for less of a for not having a better word for it, and just like telling my team, like I look at stuff in the morning, like I need this done and this done and this done. Can you look at these claims, these things? And hopefully they know me well enough by now. Like none of it's ill intended. We just need to accomplish the goal, and I think offsites do help, right? So like we try to get at least all of our leaders involved in an offsite to get to know each other. If nothing else, just to have kind of that bond where then later we can have a communicative and there's no barrier or ill-intended, like where they're coming from. So that can help.
So, and one thing that you said that I wanted to touch on is the growth from 100 to 600 employees in the course of less than 2 years, because one of the hot topics, I was just at a conference last week and we were talking within the legal and insurance world, the recruitment and retention issue that's going on right now. And it seems as if you're not really having so much of an issue with the recruitment.
At least recruitment.
No.
Retention.
How your secret sauce? Like, well,
that's very real, the like recruitment and retention. So that I think that's industry wide. If you talk to any claims organization about it, it's not even recruitment and retention. It's about onboarding and training, right? So like you can recruit people off the street, but depending on how robust your onboarding department is, it's not going to do you any good. So we don't do that. We do have an onboarding department, but we also hire people that are fairly experienced in their field or whatever they're doing as far as tenure or claims handling may be concerned. We fairly compensate them for that, and then we retain them. It doesn't mean it's still not an issue, right? Like we're still looking at attrition depending on how much we keep or move on. And then also like potentially sometimes we attrition ourselves, right? So like we do have a requirement for 6 months in a position, and potentially we may lengthen that just depending what is needed. And we have made exceptions to do it, but because we hire so many and we're growing so quickly, so I may hire you in this position and in 6 months you're good enough or you've experienced enough, or then you'll apply for the next promotion up. So like we're attritioning ourselves to keep moving up as well. So.
And I do think that's so important, right? Because what you said earlier about progressive is like you kind of got stuck at a certain point and knew that if you wanted to grow, you were going to have to go somewhere else. So to know you can come into your company and within 6 months, if you're doing a good job, grow. I mean, that's huge for recruiting and retaining people.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest in interviewing people. That's the number one reason, like when you ask like why Reserv or why are you looking elsewhere, is just opportunity, right? Like people have been in the industry for a long time and either stuck for whatever reason. A lot of insurance companies aren't growing as quickly as they used to, or they're even downsizing to some extent. So like they just don't have the opportunity to move up or advance. And we definitely have that, so much to an extent, like sometimes we will post externally only just because we don't have enough internal people with 6 months tenure. It's a real thing. And we also need books to like establish themselves before we keep taking our tenured people out of them. So it's a fine line going back and forth, but there's, a wealth of opportunity to move up within the organization.
So, and let's talk a little bit though about the types of claims that you're seeing in your role at Reserv, and and how that's different from what you were handling at Progressive.
Yeah, I don't think they're a big of a difference for the most part, because the clients are fairly similar in how they in capacity, and they're both commercial policies. So both have a CSL limit on them compared to like a personal auto policy that's got state limits for them. And then some of them are even driven by like state statutes or regulations that require you to protect the general public. So I've been dealing with the same amount for the most part. Like within Uber, there is a statute that for all states that you have to protect third-party liability. So that's like a blanket policy across that. And then for first party, there are some requirements of like, having your own coverage And that's fairly similar for any type of those programs and even current clients I'm dealing with. So I don't think the claims are much indifferent. And even like to the PR extent of having, like, maybe we're right on the border of a 50-50 mod comp state. Are we willing to like go down to 49? Probably not, because of a PR thing. Like the client is, we'd rather, like, again, ultimate lowest cost. What can we pay to make this go away? Or what can we owe now that'll be better for our client and us on the front end than having to fight or do something that could potentially hurt us on the back end. So
Yeah.
I think those are fairly similar overlaps. And that's, kind of how I slid in so easily to this, just because there's a lot of the similarities with it.
Yes. But your role is slightly different though, right? Because you're kind of an intermediary. So how has that transition been for you? I imagine it was certainly, I'm sure, a change, right? But then kind of a welcome change, because now you get to like advocate for the clients to the carrier, right?
Yeah, so big change. So, I managed teams, and it was more of just like a claim. That's really what I looked at, because claims, helping people, moving claims forward, reaching for a goal, for a metric. Here, I would say like leadership to everything else is like almost a 50-50 split. So maybe half my time is like leading my teams, making sure they meet metrics, going for goals. And the other half is client or process or data driven. So like on the back end, like doing presentations, showing our metrics to clients. So I think that's the biggest change. From a carrier, like you're only ever really talking to your immediate leader or VP or whoever may be about your results. Here, like potentially you could have multiple bosses. You have some from the client that'll reach out. Because we're an insurtech and small, like sometimes the executive branch will reach out with like different questions. Like we're small enough where they're comfortable to ask those questions. And then we have to present to the client, like, here's where we're at. This is why we're at. This is what we're training. Like having those conversations that I would have never had at a larger carrier. Like only, potentially a senior director, VP would have those direct interactions with an Uber, compared to now, like we're in constant contact with the client at all times. And then having, again, like going back to developing SOPs, updating SOPs, like we're on the move at all times, creating new action plans, creating new things or processes in general that may be better for us, talking to vendors, vetting out different vendors, trying different pilots, implementing AI. So before I left Progressive, we really didn't have any type of, I'll say AI, with, again, lack of a better term, of more large language models and some other things that go along with it. But here we are, we're an insurtech. We're very heavily leaning into that as far as like what we can utilize, how we can benefit our adjusters. We're not trying to replace adjusters, but we're trying to make their job easier, more efficient, and more accurate, right? Like if a language model can summarize a claim in 10 seconds versus you having to look through 10 pages of notes and trying to like get an updated note, like that's a huge win. That's a huge benefit. Obviously there's some, you still got to go back and make sure everything's in line and it didn't miss something, because it's not a perfect system. And sometimes it doesn't always find every little thing you need, but it's still a huge time saver. So leaning into those things as well.
Well, and Jen could probably speak a lot about this, because she was just at a conference and like was messaging me. She's like, this whole presentation is about AI. But you were hearing a lot on it, so I would love for you to like expand on what.
Well, it's crazy. Like the one thing that they were telling us about, which I didn't know about, is what plaintiffs' firms are using. I guess it's this AI program called Even Up. And it will go through all of the medical records and will find the gaps and be like, well, your primary care recommended that you see an ortho and you didn't, so you better go before we make a demand. And like, it'll go through everything and tell the plaintiff's attorney where the gaps are so they can fill the holes. But then based on all the information that it read, it will actually draft the demand letter and send it, the whole demand package, and send it right. Like, it's mind-boggling. And so what I guess the trends that people are seeing, and I don't like Megan does most of the GL work in our office and the auto claims and all that. So it blew my mind to hear about this. And it said it's making bad plaintiffs' attorneys mediocre. Right. So, and it's also like helping with discovery, like telling them exactly what questions to ask in discovery, and that it's driving up the value of claims 20 to 30%. Because now it's all of these things that attorneys didn't know, now they do.
Right. And it also saves some, like you could have probably found those gaps yourself and be like, oh, now we got to answer for why these gaps in treatment are here. And instead you just have something that'll pick it up instantly and even in real time, and give you that data feedback. Yeah, that's a real thing. That's fun. I mean, at that point, like, what are the case managers for? I guess the negotiation piece on the back end of it, but like, you're doing the job of what a case manager should be doing. So I'm sure they'll look for it at some point to like even reduce size of case managers, and then just have them hold more, because they don't need to touch them as often or as frequently. So another win as far as staffing on their side too.
It's just crazy. And I mean, they did also, I mean, talk about then what to do from either the insurance company perspective or from the legal perspective, and like all the different AI products out there. But then it's like somebody asked the question, they're like, is there an AI that will tell me which AI to use? Because there's so many products out there. And it's just trying to determine like which one works best for you. And also and I think this is maybe different for a company like yours, right? That's new and it's growing, and people are probably hungry when they come, right? Because why would you go to a new company to try to help it grow if you just wanted to be okay with the status quo, right? But for a lot of different companies, like, people are in their jobs 20, 30, 40 years. They just want to do what they want to do and go home at the end of the day. So it's just, how do you then also like integrate AI into that?
Yeah, those are real things too. Yeah. So like, if you have tenured adjusters that have been doing the same thing for so long, like, they definitely don't want the assistance or trust the assistance or even willing to work with it. So that is actually one of our interview questions. Like, have you had any AI experience? Are you comfortable with these programs? Like, we're trying to make sure. So like, even we don't base many things off of Windows. We're on a Mac operating system, and we use Google for a lot of stuff. And like, some tenured adjusters cannot adapt to that. So like, we try to ask and be upfront with it. Like, are you okay with new software, with the Mac OS system, those type of things as well. Going back to like the attorneys, though, I did read an article about attorneys like using ChatGPT or whatever AI to help prep like a case, and the ChatGPT quoted incorrect case law.
Oh yeah, Jen and I were just talking about this yesterday.
Oh my gosh!
So it can be beneficial, but it can also put you up a creek, because like, think of the repercussions of that.
Yeah,
so.
huge.
Yeah,
there's attorneys getting sanctioned for it. Wasn't it in Georgia?
They were all over Arizona. Yeah. It just happened too. It's crazy. I actually just talked to Megan about this yesterday, because sometimes I just like to think like, oh, what would ChatGPT? So like, I'll ask it a question, and it spit out a case law, and I was like, let me see if this is right. And I put it in Westlaw. They weren't real cases, and then it did tell me a real case with incorrect quotes. And so I can't believe that people are just relying on this, like blindly relying on it. It's insane.
It's crazy. It's pulling from the internet. Like, did someone have that incorrectly quoted, or is the system just like, I don't know what to do, so it's just putting two things together that don't make sense? But yeah, I feel like quote actual case law that didn't exist is crazy. That is
Yeah. That it's happened. Like, I've done the similar exercise as Jen, and then you like will take the case and you put it into Lexis or Westlaw, and you get nothing, and you're like, where did this even pull it out of? But then I'm like, who are the people that are just like, oh well, ChatGPT said it was okay, so let's file it.
Case managers, yeah, like, there's the same people. Yeah, they're not double checking. They're like, oh, cool. Like, they think they've done an amazing thing, and they probably won't even admit it to using the AI when they post it in there, and then they get caught out on the back end. So there's a very fine line to using AI. I would even say in like day-to-day work, like, people use it a lot in Slack and in messages, and I've become pretty good at like seeing who uses it and who doesn't. And that's what I'm afraid of. Like, don't use it as like a pure crutch. Like, use it as a tool, add on to it, change it, put it in your own tone, or at least make it sound like your own tone, versus just like a copy paste thing. Because then it's just disingenuous, right? Like, you didn't really put effort into whatever you're posting. So
yeah, I have this conversation also with my 12-year-old daughter all the time, because when I'm helping her with homework, I often have to use ChatGPT to refresh my recollection as how to solve this math problem. And I was a math major, FYI, but I don't remember 7th grade math. And I had, like, even last night I was helping her with her homework, and I'm like, she's showing him, like, I don't know, I have to figure it out. She's like, are you going to ChatGPT again? I was like, well, yes, because I need it to break it down, and then I'll remember how to do this. But again, I'm like, I need it I'm not asking for the answers. I'm asking ChatGPT to explain.
Yeah, I wasn't telling. The teacher wasn't there showing me the steps to go through. So now I'm asking ChatGPT, because like, it doesn't mean you can't find the answer, but I need to know how it got to those steps, and that's where it could help you.
Yeah. But I but AI is here, right? And it is not going away. We all have to kind of embrace it and use it to our, honestly, to our benefit, but not to completely rely on it to replace our brains.
Yeah. Fine line in that, which does scare me sometimes. Like if you use it to, like, it could probably be right 80% of the time and you're good, but the 20% it's not. Like,
It's
there's
risky.
such a risk. Yeah, you're putting yourself in such a risk for that, so it's not worth it just for it.
I think Jen and I were talking about this yesterday as well. Like, it is a wonderful tool to use as like a jump start too. Like, if you don't know where to get started, or you don't know an issue, or you don't even know where to start with your research, say on Westlaw or Lexis, it is an amazing tool to be like, okay, now I understand what the key things are. Now I can really dive into the real research, but you still need to use your brain.
Yeah. I found the biggest help in any type of AI is like a summarization tool, either versus claims or like a really long string of emails or whatever it may be. Like, I just need you, like, give me the breakdown of this, because they can read through it so much quicker, and then I can go back and verify a few key points. Like,
Yes.
that time savings in itself is normally what I try to utilize it for. Or even data. So like, we'll do, QA or audits, and we have like so many comments per audit, right? Like, but they're not filtered out per section. And then you can just have QA break it down and be like, all right, tell me the biggest outliers here. What are the most common comments, or what are this? And like, it'll give you, a much better idea and grasp of it versus manually having to go through all of it.
Yeah, it's great at stats. If you wanted to compute your stats without having to mess it up yourself, wonderful. However, there was not that long ago, Jen and I were working on this case that had like a kind of confusing accident. Like, I couldn't understand how the accident happened, and I was like, Jen, do you understand how this accident happened? And she couldn't understand how the accident happened. So we both were trying to like utilize AI to help us and AI could not figure it out. Like, I was like, maybe you can give me like a diagram. And the diagrams, I was like, this diagram doesn't make any sense. There's no way this accident happened. Eventually, it was a really good lesson at how AI messes things up all the time, because it was confusing for me. It was confusing for her. And we were like, okay, maybe this would help us. And it couldn't figure it out. I'm like, you know what? Like, we need to like just put this to our own pen to paper to try to figure out how this accident happened, because this is mucking it up even more for us.
I had to go to Google Maps and like pull out and then like pretend I had a car and like pretend I had another car and like work it out myself till I could finally figure it out.
Yeah, one of my leaders, even with AI, like, he says the best tool is Matchbox cars or Hot Wheel cars. Like, you will never beat having 2 or 3 cars on your desk in an auto claims position and just run it through, and then obviously pulling up Google Maps to kind of put where they're at. But we have far better. A good example of that, not specifically claims related, but I was trying to rearrange my office the other week, and my wife was like, well, let me see if there's an AI tool to like take a picture and like show us what best fits. And it was so far off. I was like, this is like, let me just draw it on pen and paper, because like it could just not, it just wasn't working. So I was like, it doesn't have that connection yet.
I am a very bad decorator, and so like I have no pictures on my walls or anything like that, and I really am trying. And I've like want like throw rugs and like just things to bring color into my room. So I took pictures and I uploaded them to ChatGPT, and I was like, "This is my style, and can you recommend some stuff?" It put like picture frames on the middle of my refrigerator.
It's not, Yeah, that's exactly what happened to us. Like, it was not even close. Like, my desk is a giant L. It put like a little bitty like corner like laptop desk, and I was like, this none of this fits. I don't know. None of this works. I can't do it.
But it is great if you tell it everything that's in your refrigerator and you're like, give me 3 nights of meals that'll take me 30 minutes or less to make. It might be the same 3 meals every week, a variation of them, but I do it. I'm like, I got chicken thighs, I got chicken breasts, I got ground meat, I got peppers, I got onions, and I have all the staples. Give me 3 meals. And you know what? It makes my life a little bit easier. And I was like, and now draw me up a shopping list. And I just put it's a great tool for that. My family might be bored, but
that's okay. It made it work. It's easier.
So where do you see the Reserv going? Because I think you and I were talking about I believe you had said that, you guys got through your first round of funding and now you're stepping up to your next round of funding. But and what do you foresee to be the next steps?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so we've been through 2 rounds of Series B,
2
I
rounds.
think.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. There's all kinds of talks. It could be expanding just solely as we are. There could be acquisitions within it to like take over other TPAs. From my perspective, and you may have a similar one. When I was at a carrier, TPAs in my eyes were just horrible. They're like the worst of claims organizations. They're slow to respond. They're not customer service centric, and that's why clients move TPAs all the time, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think any like clients have moved TPAs years and years, and they'll move every 6 months if they have to, just because to find a better one. So I think our first goal is to be really good at claims. Like if we can
Yeah.
get that one right, regardless of anything else that we're doing, regardless if we expand or get AI right or do anything else, if we're just good at claims, like on a carrier type level, then we'll be dominant in the market. And I think that's our first goal, along with AI kind of centric driven, or we can use those benefits as well, and then keep expanding. So.
And given that you've seen claims nationwide, in your opinion, what jurisdictions do you hate to be in the most?
Yeah, it's interesting. Depending what you're doing, like I mean, like first party BI would be like Oklahoma for you and stuff.
Yeah.
The Northeast normally seems to be fairly of a pain between New York and New Jersey and those states.
Yeah.
Can be of a pain. California has quite a few regulations as far as like even how to respond to emails, status letters, asking for car seats. So there's probably like 5 or 6 states that you just like really have to be keen on making sure you're
Yeah.
hitting all the marks, and then the rest are fairly standard. Like if you follow a standard process of sending updates, the ROR process or whatever it may be, you'll hit all of them if you just make that a slightly tighter than whatever the tightest one is out there. And then you just have to earmark those specific states. Like when I worked for I did a lot of Florida BI at Uber, and like the PDR in itself, the policy disclosure, was such like a time warp to get all those signed and policies out. It was such a pain, and then having to respond, making sure like the 7-day demands that came through all the time.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it just depends on what you're doing and in what state. You just have to be very careful what you're doing. And then like Florida's bad faith thing is really bad too. So
Florida comes up a lot.
Yeah, California has a lot of other regulatory stuff, but they're not near as bad in those kind of instances and having to be. And then in Texas, there's Stowers is one, and then I forget the other one. But there's like really strenuous timeline demands, and if you don't get back to them with what I think it's a 14-day, like you're automatically open for like bad faith, and you open policy limits for a lot of stuff or even beyond. So it just depending on what you're doing. I don't think any of them are crazy hard. Again, just what field you're in, what you got to be lookout for.
Yeah. Like it's funny because obviously, like, Jen and I were in PA, New Jersey, and I think PA has its own weird idiosyncrasies, particularly Philadelphia. And sometimes like we have other offices that have matters in Philadelphia, and it's kind of hard to explain to people who are not accustomed to practicing in Philadelphia, like the oddities of Philadelphia pleadings and practices and court conferences, and to the point that like other people are like, what they do it that way? It just is how it is. Like,
yeah, and that's, you have to have like local house counsel for most of these things. So like, yeah, we have counsel all over that because we're not in all this, like we don't have any counsel on payroll as far as like within an employee. It's all counsel we have to hire. I mean, it's all got to be local because like you said, every group in every city has their weird idiosyncrasies with it. Like we don't know, like we're not we may have one claim in there every 6 months. I don't know what all their specifics are. So
I think sometimes that people think like we're lying, like, you got to do it this way, and they're like, why? I'm like, and you have to give them the response like, that's just the way it is. Like
that's it's a standard set. Yeah,
it is. And like I am actually in Northeast PA, like in the Scranton area, if you're familiar with that. And like if somebody has a claim in Scranton and you hire a Philly attorney to come to Scranton, the Lackawanna County Courthouse, be like, why is this big city attorney coming here for this? You know, and a lot of bars are like that. Like they're small and they're collegial and everybody knows each other. And if you're an outsider, like don't walk in here. So I think that brings another layer of complication to it as well.
Yeah. I think similarly, like if you're in the boroughs in New York and you have like a Philadelphia attorney roll up that, you know, they're a New York attorney too, but their office is Philadelphia, like what is this like Philadelphia person doing up here in the boroughs? We don't want them up here.
Yeah, you're already behind the 8 ball because everyone's got this perception of why you're there. Not good.
Yes. So, but you know, one thing that often though comes up, or I hear a lot of, is though jurisdictions that you know you don't like to be in because of of exposure issues. And have you come across that too? Because obviously Philadelphia is one that comes up all the time with that, and I hear, you know, a lot of times Texas is one that I hear that comes up a lot with exposure issues. But do you have certain areas that you're like, ugh, yep, okay, we got a claim here, like it's going to be a headache from exposure standpoint just because of, you know, decision or holdings that we might have from judges or or jury.
Jury it may not even be like if you're talking about Texas, I would say like South Texas, the Valley can be fairly tricky, even like looking at county to county, and like the jury of your peers not normally favorable to us. So but again, unless you've like worked in those states or you have counsel listed, you may not know those little specifics. And like Texas is such a big state.
It is.
Some counties are complete opposite, right? Like if you're looking at a liberal versus conservative area and how their precedent has gone. So like you may completely change, like 2 counties over may be a completely different way you attack that claim versus another.
Yeah.
So having some type of idea of like where you're at and what precedent has been set there before can definitely go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, Pennsylvania much smaller in size than Texas, but similar in that type of makeup, because what you're going to see in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh compared to what you're going to see in between is
right.
Like,
and the rural areas, way different.
Yeah, different, like, Pennsylvania. Not to offend anybody.
No, it's definitely it's such a varying state, but I mean I would imagine a lot of the states that you deal with are like that. Are you in all 50 states?
Yes, so I have license in all 50 states. I would say if you're looking at like a more flat state, California is fairly equal across of it as compared to other states. But in general, depending on what state you're in, you're going to look at it different county by county.
Well, Jacob, it's been such like a pleasure to have you on. But one thing I asked before we let it release any of our guests is I asked, if you were to look back and knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I've done what I wanted to do. I would potentially say like take the jump or risk earlier, but I think it played out well for me in the timing of it. I don't know if I would have made a risk or jump sooner than that. Like it would have been a company that I either enjoyed or stuck with, or maybe I think the timing worked out perfectly with where I am just because of how they're growing and where I got in fairly early. But not being afraid to take the risk. I think knowing what I know now and knowing that no matter where I get placed or what I do, that my skills can be transferable to anything that I do, and not being afraid of I only know this thing, or I've only had experience in this, and how am I going to work in a different position, that I can pick it up, I can learn it, that I have the skill set needed to potentially be successful in whatever I potentially get placed in. And then so that I think gives you some confidence and ability to take the risk, because even if this fails or whatever I take on next fails, I know I can start at a pretty high level wherever I go and pick it back up and move forward again.
Yeah.
So.
And I do think that you probably made the shift at a perfect time for yourself. Like you had a solid training and experience at Progressive that you probably were feeling pretty confident in your abilities at that point. Like you had a great base to then take a leap to do something that is a little risky but has really good rewards.
Yeah, I don't think I was gaining or learning as much anymore. I was very comfortable in the position. Like I could do the
Mhm.
position, at half the speed and still
Yeah.
accomplish everything because I'd been doing it so long. Which is completely the opposite of now. Like there's not enough hours in the day. So, but you got to be willing to put in the work too. I
Yeah.
tell people that coming to us or a startup or insurance, like we will work very hard, but we will also accomplish a lot. So like if you like
Yeah.
the reward and working hard, it's the great place for you. If you're looking for someone to relax or not do a lot, then it's not the place because we got a lot to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that sentiment. You have to be able or have to be wanting to put the time in to
Right.
grow
And
it.
depending on where you're at in your career and what you're doing, maybe not. Like people are definitely comfortable where they're at, which is perfectly
That's okay.
fine. Yeah, that's okay too. But I've also seen like we've got quite a few Geico people in the last few years because Geico had such a downturn and
Mhm.
released so many talented people that we've been able to pick them up and get
Great.
them into position. So yeah, we've taken advantage of it.
Yeah, you're taking advantage of like that training too. Like when you're coming from again a big established carrier that they have these training modules that is great that they have them in so they have this great base training and then they can come into to Reserv and be ready to run and expand too.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. We appreciate really good carrier training, but USA, Geico, Progressive, State Farm, wherever maybe we know that their onboarding training programs are very robust. So yeah,
Mhm.
we're definitely keen on getting people with good experience from them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Jacob, it's been such a pleasure sitting down and chatting with you. I love hearing about everything that Reserv has been doing, and I can't wait to see what more you guys are going to do and how much more they're going to grow. I think it's an exciting time, I think, for you to be there and kind of got in at the ground level. So kudos to you for
Yeah.
doing that.
Super excited. Yeah. Keep an eye on LinkedIn. You'll see stuff from Reserve pop up
You will.
frequently. We were just in Vegas for I believe ITC and then InsureTech like 2 weeks before. So we're out there.
Yeah, I have you on my follow list. So
Okay.
I am watching. And
Yeah.
of course, to all our listeners out there, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. And thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.